The sky above Earth changed on a quiet Tuesday morning. 12,000 warships appeared from nowhere, blocking out the sun across 3 continents. They hung in the atmosphere like metal mountains, each one larger than any city on the planet below. Admiral Krelvox stood on the command bridge of his flagship and looked down at the blue and green world beneath him. His gray skin stretched tight over sharp bones as he smiled. This would be easy. This would be fast. The Verthax Dominion had conquered 347 worlds across the galaxy. Earth would simply be number 340-8. He had studied the intelligence reports carefully. Humans were a young species. They had only left their planet 3 centuries ago. They fought among themselves constantly. Their nations argued over borders, resources, and beliefs. They had no single leader, no unified army, technology that the Verthax had moved past thousands of years ago. Krelvox gave the order to broadcast the standard message. His voice echoed across every radio frequency, every television screen, every phone and computer on the planet below. People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Verthax Dominion. You will surrender your weapons, your governments, and your resources. You have 1 rotation of your planet to comply. Resistance will result in complete destruction. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning. He ended the transmission and turned to his second-in-command. Prepare the ground forces. I want landing zones established within 6 rotations. This should take no longer than 8 at most. His officer nodded. The humans seem primitive, Admiral. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Their ships cannot match our speed. What resistance could they possibly offer? Krelvox laughed. It was a cold sound, like stones grinding together. None. They will do what every species does. They will panic. They will fight each other for survival. Their leaders will try to make deals to save themselves. And then they will kneel. He had seen it happen hundreds of times before. Conquest was simple when you understood how species behaved under pressure. They always fell apart. They always turned on each other. Fear was the greatest weapon in the universe. But something strange began happening on the planet below, in Washington. The president picked up a phone that had never rung before. It was a direct line to Moscow. Within minutes, she was speaking to the Russian president. Old enemies exchanged words that had never been spoken between their nations. Words like together and united in whatever it takes. In Beijing, generals shared military codes with their counterparts in Tokyo and Seoul. Decades of tension evaporated in hours. The threat above them was bigger than any argument below, in the Middle East. Soldiers who had pointed guns at each other for generations lowered their weapons. They looked up at the sky and saw something that made their conflicts seem small. Ancient hatreds were set aside, not forgotten, but paused. There would be time for old arguments later. If there was a later, scientists who had spent their careers competing for funding suddenly found themselves in the same video calls. Researchers in Germany shared data with labs in India. Engineers in Brazil connected with factories in China. Every person with knowledge that might help was pulled into a growing network of shared purpose. Krelvox watched the communication patterns on his monitoring screens. His smile slowly faded. This was not the chaos he expected. This was not panic. This was something his species had never encountered in 10,000 years of conquest. The humans were coming together. His intelligence officer approached with a troubled expression. Admiral, we are detecting unusual activity. The humans are not fighting each other. They are ... organizing. That is impossible, Krelvox said. Our psychological profiles are clear. Humans are divided. They cannot agree on anything. Their history is nothing but war and conflict. The profiles may have been incomplete, Admiral. It appears their divisions only exist when they have no common enemy. When threatened from outside, they respond differently. Krelvox stared at the screens showing Earth. Military forces were moving, but not against each other. Factories were shifting production. Communication networks were merging. In just 18 hours, the scattered nations of Earth had begun transforming into something new. He had studied human divisions and seen weakness. He had looked at their conflicts and assumed they could not cooperate. He had made the same mistake that every predator makes when it watches prey animals fight among themselves. He had forgotten what happens when those animals notice the predator. On the ground, a retired general named Elena Vasquez was pulled out of her quiet life in Argentina. She was 73 years old and had not worn a uniform in 15 years. Now she stood in a command center that had been built in just 12 hours, surrounded by officers from 20 different nations. "We have 18 hours before their deadline," she told them. "That is not much time, but it is enough to show them who they are dealing with." A young captain from Nigeria raised his hand. "General, their technology is far beyond ours. Their ships have shields we cannot break. Their weapons can destroy entire cities. How do we fight something like that?" Elena smiled. It was not a cruel smile, but it held something dangerous. "We do what humans have always done, Captain. We learn. We adapt. We refuse to give up. They think they know us because they watched us fight each other. They have no idea what we become when we fight together." She turned to face a screen showing the massive fleet above them. "They came here expecting to find a planet of scattered tribes. They will find something else entirely. 8 billion minds working toward one goal. 8 billion hearts beating with one purpose. They wanted to conquer Earth. Instead, they have given us something we never had before." "What is that, General?" the captain asked. "A reason to stop fighting ourselves." Above the planet, Admiral Krelvox felt something he had not experienced in his long career. It was small at first, just a whisper at the edge of his thoughts. But as he watched the impossible coordination happening below, the whisper grew louder. It was doubt. He had conquered worlds where species surrendered at the first show of force. He had crushed civilizations that begged for mercy. He had never faced a species that responded to an invasion by becoming more unified, more focused, more determined. The Verthax had built their empire on the assumption that all species eventually broke under pressure, that all civilizations had a breaking point. That fear was the ultimate weapon. They were about to learn that humans were different. They were about to learn that humans had spent their entire history facing impossible odds and finding ways to survive. Ice ages, plagues, wars, disasters. Every generation had faced something that should have destroyed them. Every generation had found a way through. The Verthax were not humanity's first apocalypse. They were just the latest, and Earth was getting ready to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. The first wave of Verthax ground forces landed in 12 locations across Earth. Commander Dexfrol led the assault on the European continent, his troops marching out of their landing craft with complete confidence. They had done this hundreds of times on hundreds of worlds. The pattern was always the same. Show overwhelming force, crush the first resistance, and watch the survivors surrender. The first battle lasted for hours. Human forces fell back under the power of Verthax plasma rifles. The alien weapons cut through tanks and buildings like they were made of paper. Dextrol watched with satisfaction as the defenders retreated into the countryside. "Send the victory report," he ordered. "Sector 7 is secured. Minimal casualties." Humans are retreating as expected. But something strange happened during the second battle, just 2 days later. The same plasma rifles that had been so devastating before suddenly became less effective. Human soldiers were wearing new armor, hastily made but surprisingly strong. The plasma bolts still burned, but they no longer killed instantly. The humans kept fighting even when hit. Dextrol studied the captured armor pieces with confusion. The material was crude by Verthax standards, but it had been designed specifically to disperse the energy frequency of their weapons. That should have been impossible. It had taken the Dominion years to understand plasma dispersal. The humans had figured it out in 48 hours. By the third battle, the plasma rifles were almost useless. Human engineers had shared their discoveries across the entire planet. Factories in 36 countries were now producing the new armor. Every soldier, every volunteer, every person willing to fight was being equipped with protection that should not have existed. Dexerol requested a meeting with Admiral Krelvox. "They are learning too fast. he reported. Our weapons are becoming ineffective. They study everything we use against them and find ways to counter it. This is not normal, Krelvox frowned. Then we use different weapons. We have thousands of options. I am not certain that will solve the problem, Admiral. The speed of their adaptation is unprecedented. I have never seen anything like it in any conquest. The Admiral dismissed his concerns. They are primitive. We simply need to apply more pressure. But pressure only seemed to make the humans more dangerous. In Nebraska, a farmer named Robert Chen found a crashed Verthax drone in his field. Instead of running away, he spent 3 days taking it apart piece by piece. He documented everything with his phone, uploading videos to a network that human scientists had created specifically for sharing captured technology. Within a week, his discoveries had reached researchers on every continent. In Lagos, a 19-year-old woman named Adaze wrote code in her small apartment. She had been a computer science student before the invasion. Now she was part of a global team trying to disrupt Verthax communications. Her breakthrough came at 3 in the morning when she discovered a pattern in their signal frequencies. The code she wrote that night was being used by resistance fighters around the world by sunset. In Japan, retired engineers came out of quiet lives to work on impossible projects. They had spent their careers building cars and electronics. Now they were reverse engineering alien power sources. Their grandchildren brought them food while they worked through the night, driven by a determination that surprised even themselves. This was what the Verthax had failed to understand about humanity. Every person was a potential problem solver. Every mind was a weapon. The invaders had studied human military forces and calculated their strength. They had not thought to count the teachers, the farmers, the students, the mechanics, the curious minds in every city and village who looked at alien technology and thought, I wonder how that works. Commander Thexrel lost his first major battle 6 weeks after landing. His forces were ambushed by human fighters using weapons that combined Earth technology with stolen Verthax components. The hybrid weapons were crude and sometimes unreliable, but they worked. And more importantly, they were improving every day. He retreated to a fortified position and tried to understand what had gone wrong. His species had been conquering worlds for 10,000 years. Their tactics were perfect. Their technology was superior. Their soldiers were trained from birth to fight and win. But the humans did not fight the way other species fought. They did not follow predictable patterns. They did not use the same tactics twice. Every battle was different because every human commander thought differently, solved problems differently, approached war differently. The Verthax had evolved to dominate through consistency. Their strength was doing the same thing perfectly every time. They had never faced an enemy whose strength was doing something new every time. A message arrived from another sector. Human forces there had captured a Verthax communication station intact. They were already breaking the encryption. Soon, they would be listening to every order, every report, every conversation in the invasion force. Thexrel felt something cold settle in his chest. It was an emotion his species rarely experienced. It was the feeling of being prey instead of predator. He made a secure call to Admiral Krelvox. We need to discuss our strategy, Admiral. I do not believe this invasion is going as planned. Krelvox's image appeared on screen. The Admiral looked tired. I am receiving similar reports from all sectors. The humans are more capable than our intelligence suggested, or capable than any species we have ever encountered, Thexrel corrected. They learn faster than should be possible. They share information instantly across their entire planet. Every time we use a weapon, they find a way to counter it. Every time we win a battle, they analyze why and prevent it from happening again. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. I believe we have made a serious mistake, Admiral. We assumed that their short history meant they were weak. But consider what they have accomplished in that short time. 3 centuries ago, they had not left their planet. Now, they are matching our technology through pure adaptation. What are you suggesting? Krelvox asked. I am suggesting that we may have invaded the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because they are strong, but because they never stop getting stronger. Every day we fight them, they become more difficult to defeat. If we do not end this quickly, I am not certain it can be ended at all." The admiral was silent for a long moment. "Then we will bring more ships. More weapons. More soldiers. We will crush them with overwhelming force before they can adapt further." But as Thexrel ended the call, he wondered if even that would be enough. The humans had a quality his species did not have a word for. It was the ability to face impossible situations and refuse to accept that they were impossible. It was the drive to keep fighting, keep learning, keep improving. No matter how bad things became, the Verthax conquered species that accepted reality. Humans, it seemed, had a habit of changing reality to suit themselves. And Commander Thexrel was beginning to understand that this invasion might teach the Dominion something they had never learned in 10,000 years of victory. They were learning how to lose. Admiral Krelvox stood in his command center and stared at reports that made no sense. His invasion force was the largest the Dominion had sent against any world in 3,000 years. 12,000 warships. 5 million ground troops. Enough firepower to destroy a planet 10 times over, and they were losing. Not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily, unavoidably losing. The reports from the surface told a disturbing story. Human forces were no longer just defending. They were attacking. They were targeting supply lines, communication centers, and ammunition stores. They were using tactics that the Verthax military manuals had no response to. But the most troubling reports were about the prisoners. Human forces had started capturing Verthax soldiers alive. At first, Krelvox assumed this was for interrogation. He expected reports of torture, of information being extracted through pain. That was how things were done in the galaxy. That was how the Dominion treated their own prisoners. Instead, the humans did something far more unsettling. They studied, they learned. They asked questions, not about military secrets, but about biology, psychology, culture, and society. They wanted to understand what made the Verthax work. Within weeks, human scientists had decoded the Dominion language completely. Within months, they understood Verthax biology better than many Verthax doctors. They discovered weaknesses that the Dominion had hidden for millennia. The Verthax soldiers were bred for obedience. Their minds were shaped from birth to follow orders without question. This made them excellent at executing commands, but terrible at independent thinking. When their communications were disrupted, they became confused. When their commanders were killed, they often froze in place, unable to decide what to do next. Human soldiers, by contrast, were trained to think for themselves. Every soldier was expected to make decisions when separated from their unit. Every fighter could become a leader if necessary. There were no weak links in their chain of command because every link was designed to function alone. The humans also discovered something important about Verthax technology. It was old. Not old in the sense of being worn or broken, but old in the sense of being unchanged. The same weapons had been used for 5,000 years. The same tactics had been taught for longer than that. The Dominion had perfected their tools so long ago that they had forgotten how to improve them. The humans, who had gone from stone tools to nuclear power in less than 10,000 years, recognized this stagnation immediately. They saw it not as a sign of perfection, but as a critical weakness. General Amara Okonkwo stood before the Unified Command Council and presented her plan. She was a tall woman with gray in her hair and steel in her eyes. She had commanded troops on 3 continents before the invasion. Now she commanded the entire human resistance. "We have been defending long enough," she said. "It is time to show them what humanity does when we decide something needs to be eliminated." She pulled up a map showing Verthax positions across the planet. "We have captured enough of their technology to understand it. More importantly, we have improved it. Our engineers have been working day and night, combining our creativity with their tools. The results are impressive." She pressed a button, and the map changed to show a network of red lines connecting key enemy positions. "This is Operation Mirror. We will use their own weapons against them, modified to be unpredictable. We will strike their supply lines simultaneously across all continents. We will blind their communications. and we will show them that the hunters have become the hunted. The operation launched 3 days later. Under cover of darkness that the humans used, and the Verthax feared commander Thexril was reviewing reports in his command post when the lights went out. Then the communications went dead. Then he heard explosions in the distance, growing closer. Human fighters burst through the walls using cutting tools made from salvaged Verthax technology. But the tools had been modified. They cut faster and cleaner than anything the Dominion had ever built. The humans had taken good technology and made it better in ways that Thexril could not. Understand? He surrendered without fighting. There was no point. His guards were overwhelmed in seconds. As human soldiers secured the room, Thexril looked at them with something approaching respect. "You've done something unprecedented," he said to the officer who took his weapons. "No species has ever turned our own technology against us so effectively." The officer, a young woman with burns on her face from an earlier battle, shrugged. "We just improved it a little." That is what we do. Across the planet, the story was the same. Verthax positions fell, one after another. Supply ships were hijacked using codes that the humans had cracked weeks ago. Communication satellites were taken over and used too. BROADCAST, false orders. The invasion force, so confident just months before, was falling apart. Admiral Krelvox watched his empire's finest military force crumble before an enemy that should have been conquered in days. He ordered a retreat to orbit, pulling his surviving ground forces back to the safety of his ships. But even there, he found no peace. Human engineers had been busy during the months of fighting. Using captured Verthax parts and human innovation, they had built something that should have been impossible. They had built ships that could reach orbit. The first human spacecraft rose from hidden bases around the planet. They were ugly things, rough and unfinished compared to the elegant Verthax warships. But they flew, and they fought. And their weapons, hybrid creations that mixed alien power with human ingenuity, tore through shields that had stopped every attack for millennia. Krelvox felt fear for the first time in his long life. Not the controlled, rational caution of a military commander. True fear. The fear of prey facing a predator that it did not. Understand? He gave an order that no Verthax admiral had given. In 10,000 years, he ordered a full retreat. "General?" Okonkwo watched the alien fleet pull away from LV, Earth's orbit. She stood in a command center that had been built in an abandoned mine, surrounded by officers from every nation on the planet. They had won. Against impossible odds, against superior technology, against an enemy that had never known defeat, they had won. But she knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. "They will return," she said quietly. "Or others will come. The galaxy knows about us now. We cannot go back to being invisible." A colonel from India stepped forward. "Then what do we do, General?" Okonkwo turned to face her officers. Her expression was calm but determined. "We prepare. We build. We make sure that anyone who thinks about attacking Earth understands the cost. We showed them today that we can defend our world." She paused and a small smile crossed her face. "Next time, we show them what we can do when we go on offense." The officers exchanged glances. They had grown up in a world of separate nations and old conflicts. Now they stood together as something new, something forged in fire and blood and desperate necessity. They were no longer just citizens of their countries. They were humanity, and the galaxy was about to learn what that meant. The news of the Verthax retreat spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. In diplomatic halls and military command centers, on trading stations and colony worlds, the same question was asked in 100 different languages. How did a primitive species defeat the most powerful military force in known space? The Galactic Assembly had existed for 50,000 years. 200 species from across 3 spiral arms sent representatives to discuss trade, borders, and the occasional war. For most of that time, the Verthax Dominion had been the unspoken power behind every decision. No one challenged them. No one questioned them. Their fleet was too large, their reputation too fearsome, their history of conquest too long. Now that reputation was broken, Ambassador. Ilana, of the Confederated Mines, stood before the assembly chamber. Her species communicated through patterns of light across their skin. And right now, those patterns flickered with anxiety that every delegate could read. "We have confirmed the reports," she said. "The Verthax invasion force has withdrawn from the human planet. Casualties were significant. More importantly, the humans have captured substantial amounts of Dominion technology and have already begun improving it." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Verthax delegate, a scarred warrior named Thaxel, sat in silence. His presence was a reminder that the Dominion was still watching, still dangerous. But for the first time, other species were willing to speak openly about them. "How is this possible?" asked a delegate from the Serene Collective. "The humans have only been a spacefaring species for 3 centuries. Their technology is generations behind the Dominion." "That appears to be the problem," Yelena replied. "We assumed that primitive technology meant a primitive species. We were wrong. The humans learned faster than any species in recorded history. They adapt to new challenges with a speed that our scientists cannot explain. In the span of months, they went from fighting with chemical weapons to matching Dominion plasma technology." She paused, her light patterns shifting to a deeper shade of worry. "And now they are building starships." The chamber fell silent. Every delegate understood what that meant. A species that could defeat the Verthax on their own world was dangerous enough. A species that could take that fight to the stars was something else entirely. "We should destroy them now," Thaxel growled, "before they become a greater threat. The full force of the Dominion fleet could end this, could it?" Yelena asked quietly. "You sent 12,000 ships, Thaxel. 5 million soldiers. The greatest invasion force in 3,000 years. And you lost. What makes you think more ships would achieve a different result?" The Verthax delegate had no answer. On Earth, humanity was working harder than ever before. The victory had been costly. Cities were destroyed. Millions had died. But the species that had survived ice ages and plagues and world wars did not waste time mourning. They built. The first human interstellar vessel took shape in a shipyard that had been constructed in just 6 months. It was not beautiful like the Verthax ships, all curves and gleaming metal. It was angular, practical, covered in welded plates and exposed machinery. Engineers from every nation worked on it together, combining human knowledge with captured alien technology. They called it the Herald Captain. James Chen was chosen to command the ship. He was 42 years old, a former pilot, who had led some of the first attacks against the Verthax fleet. He had lost friends in those battles. He had nearly died twice. But he had survived, and now he was being asked to represent his entire species to the galaxy. "No pressure," his co-pilot, Commander Sarah Oduya, said with a small smile as they prepared for launch. "Just the future of humanity, depending on what you say." Chen laughed, though there was little humor in it. "I have been writing speeches for 3 weeks. Nothing seems right. How do you introduce a species that just fought off an invasion? How do you tell the galaxy that we come in peace when we just proved we are very good at war?" Oduya was quiet for a moment. "Maybe that is exactly what you tell them. The truth. We did not start this fight. We finished it. And we would rather make friends than enemies." The Herald launched on a spring morning, rising from Earth on engines that combined human and Verthax technology. It entered hyperspace using principles that human scientists were still trying to fully understand. And 18 hours later, it emerged in assembly space. The first human vessel to travel between stars. Every sensor in the region immediately focused on the small, ugly ship. Weapons powered up. Communications channels buzzed with alarm. A species that had just defeated the Verthax was now in the heart of galactic civilization. Chen activated the broadcast system. His message was transmitted on every frequency, translated into every language the ship's computers could identify. "This is Captain James Chen of the Earth Vessel Herald. We come representing humanity, a species you may have heard of recently. We did not seek the conflict that brought us to your attention. We were attacked without warning, without reason, and without mercy. We defended our home. We will make no apology for that." He paused, letting the words settle. We are aware that our victory has caused fear throughout the galaxy. We understand that fear, a species you considered primitive, has proven to be something more. You are wondering if we are a threat. You are wondering if you should destroy us before we become too powerful. In the assembly chamber, delegates leaned forward, listening to every word. Here is our answer. Earth is not a target. It is not a resource to be claimed. It is our home, and it is protected by a species that has never, in its entire history, learned how to surrender. We have faced extinction many times. We have always survived. The Verthax were not special. They were simply the latest challenge we have overcome. Chen stood straighter, his voice growing stronger. But we did not come here to threaten you. We came here to tell you who we are. We are builders and dreamers. We are scientists and artists. We have spent our existence fighting each other, but we have also spent it creating beauty, solving mysteries, and reaching for the stars. We want to be part of this galaxy, not as conquerors, but as partners. He looked directly at the camera, knowing that billions of aliens were watching. Come in peace. But understand this clearly. We are never coming in weakness. Those who approach us as friends will find friends. Those who approach us as enemies will find something else. The choice is yours. The transmission ended. Silence filled the assembly chamber. Then slowly a delegate from a minor species in the outer rim began to applaud. Others joined. Soon, half the chamber was standing, making whatever gestures of approval their species used. The Verthax delegate remained seated, his face unreadable. Yelena stepped forward to speak. The humans have made their position clear. They do not wish to conquer. They wish to join. The question before this assembly is simple. Do we welcome them, or do we make an enemy of the most adaptable species any of us have ever encountered? She turned to face the full chamber. I recommend we choose carefully, because based on everything we have seen, I do not believe we would survive making the wrong choice. In orbit around the assembly station, Captain Chen watched the debate unfold on his screens. He did not know what the outcome would be. He did not know if humanity would be welcomed or attacked. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever happened next, humanity would face it together. And that, more than any weapon or ship or technology, was what made them dangerous. The galaxy was beginning to understand that. Soon, they would understand it completely. Earth was no longer a small blue world on the edge of known space. It was the home of humanity, and humanity had arrived. 5 years had passed since the invasion, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Verthax Dominion. Once the most feared power in known space had collapsed, their defeat at Earth had shattered more than their military reputation. It had shattered the belief that they could not be beaten. Species they had oppressed for generations suddenly found their courage. Rebellions erupted on 100 conquered worlds. Empires that had stood for millennia crumbled like sandcastles. Before a rising tide, the humans did not cause these revolutions. They did not need to. They had done something more powerful than any invasion. They had proven that the invincible could be defeated, that the unconquerable could be conquered, that a small, young, primitive species could stand against the galaxy's greatest military power and win. That proof was more dangerous than any weapon. Earth had transformed as well. The shipyards that had built the Herald now produced dozens of vessels. Human explorers traveled to distant stars, meeting species that had only heard of them through fearful rumors. And everywhere they went, they found the same reaction. A mixture of curiosity, respect, and carefully hidden fear. The Galactic Assembly invited humanity to join their council. It was the fastest acceptance in 50,000 years of history. No one wanted to make an enemy of the species that had broken the Verthax. But Earth did not use its new position for conquest or domination. Instead, it became something that the galaxy had never seen before. A neutral ground. A place where old enemies could meet without weapons. Where disputes could be resolved through words instead of war. Where the adaptable minds of humanity could look at ancient conflicts and suggest solutions that neither side had ever considered. Ambassador Amara Okonkwo. Formerly, General Okonkwo had led the human delegation for 3 years. She had gone from commanding armies to commanding negotiations, and she had discovered that the skills were surprisingly similar. Both required understanding your opponent. Both required patience. Both required knowing when to push and when to hold back. She sat in her office on the orbital station that humans had built above Earth, reviewing the final documents of the Terran Accords. This treaty would formally establish humanity's role in the galaxy. It would create new rules for contact between species. It would, in many ways, reshape how the galaxy worked. Her assistant announced a visitor. Admiral Krelvox requests an audience. Ambassador. Okonkwo nodded. Send him in. The Verthax admiral entered slowly. He looked older than he had 5 years ago, his gray skin showing lines of age that had not been there before. He was no longer a conqueror. He was no longer even a prisoner, technically. He had been released 2 years ago and had chosen to stay on Earth as an advisor. Helping humanity understand the galaxy they had joined, he sat across from Okonkwo, his posture stiff but not hostile. They had spoken many times over the years. Something like respect had developed between them, though neither would call it friendship. The Accords will be signed tomorrow, Okonkwo said. The galaxy will have a new structure. Your Dominion's empire will be formally dissolved. How do you feel about that? Krelvox was silent for a long moment. I feel many things. Regret, certainly. My people ruled for 10,000 years. Now we are scattered, diminished, forced to rebuild as one species among many. It is not how I expected my life to end. But, Okonkwo prompted. But I have learned something in these 5 years, something that changes how I see everything. He looked at her directly. I still do not understand how you won. That confusion has haunted me since the day I ordered the retreat. Okonkwo leaned back in her chair. What specifically do you not understand? Everything, Krelvox admitted. We had superior numbers, superior technology, superior experience. We had conquered hundreds of species using the exact same methods. Every tactical analysis said we should have won easily, but we did not. I have studied your history, your culture, your biology. I still cannot identify what makes you different. Okonkwo smiled slightly. It was not a mocking smile, but one of genuine reflection. I think I can explain it, though you may not like the answer. Please. She stood and walked to the window, looking down at the blue and green world below. You attacked Earth, expecting to find one enemy, one military, one government. You planned to defeat that enemy and force the planet to surrender. It was a logical plan. It had worked hundreds of times before. She turned back to face him. But when you attacked, you did not create one enemy. You created 8 billion of them. Every single human on the planet became your opponent. Not just the soldiers. Not just the leaders. Everyone. Farmers and teachers and children and scientists. Each one thinking, adapting, contributing, refusing to give up. Krelvox nodded slowly. We noticed this. The coordination was unprecedented. But you still did not understand what it meant, Okonkwo continued. You saw our divisions and assumed we were weak, our nations fighting each other, our people arguing over politics and religion and resources. You thought these conflicts proved we could not work together. She sat back down, leaning forward with intensity. Those divisions exist because we challenge everything. We question everything. We argue and debate and compete. It makes us chaotic. It makes us difficult to govern. But it also makes us impossible to predict, impossible to suppress, impossible to defeat. Because you never think the same way twice, Krelvox said, understanding dawning in his eyes. Exactly. Your soldiers were bred for obedience. They followed orders perfectly. But when something unexpected happened, they did not know how to respond. Our soldiers are trained to think for themselves. When something unexpected happens, they adapt. They improvise. They find solutions that no manual could ever predict. She paused, letting her words sink in. You tried to conquer a species that has spent its entire existence conquering itself. Every challenge we have ever faced, we have overcome through adaptation and determination. Ice ages, plagues, famines, wars. Every generation has faced something that should have destroyed us. Every generation has found a way through. Krelvox was silent, processing this. Finally, he spoke. You were not our first apocalypse. We were just the latest Okonkwo finished. And now you understand why it was a mistake to invade Earth. Not because we are stronger or smarter or more advanced. Because we are stubborn. Because we never give up. Because when someone threatens our home, we stop fighting each other and start fighting them together. The Admiral lowered his head slowly. It was a gesture of respect that his species had not offered to another in recorded history. The galaxy will never make this mistake again, he said quietly. Okonkwo nodded. We are counting on it. They sat in silence for a moment, two former enemies who had found a strange peace. Outside the window, ships moved through space, carrying humans to every corner of the galaxy. Below them, Earth turned slowly, its people looking up at stars that were no longer distant and unknown. What will humanity do with its new power? Krelvox asked eventually. You could build an empire greater than the Dominion ever was. You have the strength. You have the will. Okonkwo shook her head. That is not who we want to be. We have seen what empires do. We have lived under them. We have built them ourselves and watched them fall. We know that conquering others only creates enemies. We would rather create friends, she smiled, and this time there was warmth in it. Besides, we have enough challenges on our own world to keep us busy for centuries. We do not need to go looking for more problems. We just want to explore, to learn, to grow, and to make sure that no one ever makes the mistake of thinking we are easy prey. Krelvox considered this. A peaceful species that is terrifying in war. A divided people that unite instantly against threats. A primitive civilization that adapts faster than ancient empires. You are a contradiction, Ambassador. We are human, Okonkwo said simply. Contradictions are what we do best. The next day, the Terran Accords were signed. Representatives from 100 species gathered to witness the moment when humanity officially joined the galactic community. There were speeches and ceremonies, promises of cooperation and friendship, but everyone there knew the real reason they had accepted Earth so quickly. It was not because humans were peaceful. It was not because they were friendly. It was because the galaxy had learned the same lesson that the Verthax had learned 5 years ago. Humanity was not a species you wanted as an enemy. And somewhere in the crowd, Admiral Krelvox watched the ceremony with ancient eyes. He had come to Earth as a conqueror. He would leave it as something he had never expected to be. A witness to the rise of the most remarkable species the galaxy had ever seen.